Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm the bookend, last one. You still got some energy? I think you should all stand up and give yourselves a round of applause for getting this far. See, only one person stood up. You get the free putter that Greg said I could give away. Okay, first I'd like to thank Greg and Dave and Untitled Performance Institute. I think we can all agree they're just taking this to a whole nother level, absolutely phenomenal. And I'd also like to thank Rob Mottram. It's because of Rob that I'm here now. He connected me with Greg and Dave, and Rob's certainly been a pioneer in this, starting with Sentinella Hospital, and so I think we all can thank him a little bit, and I'm certainly learning a lot from Rob. We actually connected when I did a seminar, something like this, and Rob was already doing just what Greg said, wasn't doing this long cardio, and when I gave the lecture, it gave him a bit of the science, and we kind of bonded and connected over that. So 12 minutes a week, actually, I think it was called 15. Sorry, Greg, it's too long. So it's 12, all right? We can do 15, but 12 can be sufficient to get you some good cardio. So it's really reevaluating exercise guidelines with new science changing old thinking. If you do me a favor, I know it was done earlier in the week. Could you raise your hand if you're an MD, chiropractor, physical therapist, personal trainer? Okay, so it's quite a sort of varied sort of group here. I do a lot of lectures for a nutritional company around the country where I mostly speak to MDs, chiropractors, and nutritionists. What I can tell you is, in that world, when I do this lecture, they're like, oh, my goodness. All right? My suspicion is many people in this room are going to go, this is not that new to me. All right? And if that's the case, that's great. But hopefully what you'll get from this, because one thing I can assure you, having been doing this for 15 years now, is that the general public, the clients that you have, and maybe the MDs, your client's MD, things like that, they are going to still think that to have a healthy heart, all right, you've got to do this long cardio. We always go in the gym. Well, I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to do all this corrective exercise. Then I've got to go and do my cardio. All right? So that's what I'm really trying to change. And hopefully for some of you, if it's nothing more than be able to learn how to also transfer that message, I think this is really, really important. Because also there's the health of your clients. Okay? And part of this will be kind of explaining why the mentality of the fitness industry and the medical community went down this path. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a pretty good grasp of it. So part of this is you've always got to really see things through to the end. Things don't always seem as what they appear. So with that, could you play this video, please?
In the still of the night, and baby, all I know, my poor heart skips a beat when you're next to me. In the still of the night. Sweet caress, and with every tender kiss.
I love that double take. Maybe I should have shown that. We should have me on first with that, so that in case some people were trying to do that in the last 4 days. I don't know. So there's still one night left, right? So the point of that is really to try and get through. Where are we in the research on cardiovascular disease? I think we're at the point of where the keys have gone on the table. We're actually a little further along, but for a lot of people's minds, they're still at that point, so they've got a thought process. Hopefully by the end of this lecture, you'll be in the elevator. So my background, I was an exercise science student at Loughborough University. I think there's another Loughborough boy at the back. A couple of the foreigners might know what that is, but it's a sports institution there, pretty much the #1 there. I was a rugby player there. Then I did a master's degree in exercise physiology here in the States at Colorado State University, and then I stayed on to the physiology department and got more medically orientated in cardiovascular disease research, which is what I did my doctorate in. So this is kind of my area here. I was looking at atherosclerosis, and so we are talking about cardiovascular fitness, so I thought it worth sharing that. That's what you're born with. after years of abuse and obviously lack of exercise, poor diet, that's what can happen and lead to heart attacks. So can certainly back up any of the stuff with respect to medical science on heart disease. So this is kind of the mantra with a lot of things with people. You know, why don't people get into an exercise program? They don't have time, all right? We're not talking about your athletes, they're committed, but the many people out there that are giving up golf because they're not fit enough, they're not enjoying it, okay? Now, I don't like that, and at the end of the slideshow, I guess, I'll put that up again, and I think it's funnier with something changed. It's quite funny like that. Okay, so there's a lot of confusion, certainly, in the exercise science and the general public. If I went out and asked people, you know, what's the best exercise for cardio, you're going to get a lot of different answers. There really shouldn't be confusion if you look at the new research that's out there. So sometimes what I've done, we did this when we did some of you at the nutritional panel yesterday. I like to do this. I do this a lot with my clients. I'm about to put a slide up, and I want you to make a very quick decision as to which pile of paper you'd like to choose from. Ready? Anyone made a decision yet? Oh, you guys are slow. Which one do you want? All right, why? More value, okay? So hopefully, again, at the end of this, I do this a lot with nutrition. I'll sort of tell people, okay, we can label each food as a value, negatives, positives, and we can do the same with exercise. So we'll be doing a little bit of that today. So I'm going to use this point to make the preface. I am not saying, because at the end of this, I want this to be really clear. I'm not saying that long, slow endurance cardio training has no training effect. It clearly does. The literature has lots of research in there showing that it does. What I want to tell you is it's not the best way, all right? Certainly for the average person, and definitely for the golfer, and indeed even many of the endurance athletes could do with backing down a little bit on some of the long, slow endurance. But obviously those guys do need to do that sort of thing when you're looking at an endurance event. David stole my thunder by having that slide up earlier in the week, didn't he? But when I first saw that, I thought it was like a fabricated thing. I thought it was a joke. It's real. You know, we live in this day of everything to be automated. With that, what we need to do is make sure that our general caloric expenditure, our day-to-day activities, is up. So don't also get the message that I don't encourage walking. Absolutely, walk as much as we can, all right? But within that, we're going to need vigorous activity, and that'll be the component that really gets your cardio, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is look at the evolutionary aspect of exercise. Okay, when we were hunter-gatherers, we didn't put our Nike shoes on and go, oh, let's go jog and look for some animals, all right? We'd frighten them off in the trees. What we would do, we would walk, and then there would be ballistic activity, throwing spears to catch the food, catch the animal. Sometimes you didn't want to become the food, so you have to sprint out of the way. No, I'm going to jog out of the way. Hang on, I need to warm up first. Okay, you ever thought about that? We've got to warm up. Do you warm up when you're late for the plane? Hang on, I'm late for the plane. Got to warm up before I take 2 heavy bags and sprint down there. Okay, so maybe we should start training to just be able to train the body to get up and go. All right, in a sporting event, obviously, it would probably be sensible to do that. But we're not designed as endurance athletes. Ducks, now they're very good endurance athletes. It's amazing what we can train the human body to do, but basically, if you look at the activity lifestyle of a kind of a hunter-gatherer tribe, lots of slow walking, not a lot of jogging, and then ballistic activity, climbing trees, lots of the stuff that we've been doing here, and that has a cardiovascular component too. But interesting, if you look at the energy expenditure, don't worry too much about the calories, or the units, I should say, but if you look, it's almost 20 units for a hunter-gatherer. You look at an office worker, a little around 4. Even with a 3-mile walk, it's good, it doubles it, okay? But you can see how far short it is of a hunter-gatherer energy expenditure during the day. What's the big difference there? The vigorous component of their day-to-day activities. Interestingly, though, if we look at the maximal oxygen uptake with the hunter-gatherer tribes, they're pretty high. How many people, probably some people are aware of this. Just to give you an idea, don't worry again about the units. In milliliters per kilogram per minute, we do it per kilogram because obviously a very big guy will have a large VO2 in terms of liters of oxygen, but you've got to take into account he's got a lot of muscle mass to feed. So we do it in milliliters per kilogram per minute. The average college-age male is 45, average college-age female 35. To give you an idea of elite athletes, the Lance Armstrongs of the world, Seb Coe, who was at Loughborough, he was in like the 80s, low 80s, so the 70s and 80s. The females are probably high 60s and low 70s. Okay? Now the thing is, we got into the sports science world and it all became about this. Okay? The thing we need to realize is we just need to get out of the depths of the cave. We don't want to be down in the 15s and 20s. That's the problem. Plenty of research showing you just have to get up into even that average college-age male and female to be pretty healthy. Interestingly, though, the hunter-gatherers that weren't out there doing this long, slow duration have pretty high VO2s. I remember a lot of the guys that are lifting weights, doing high intensity, don't do any cardio. And people are like, you're not doing any cardio. I did a lot of tests on guys, just, predictive sub-max tests. Their VO2's in the 50s. That's great, healthy. They don't need if they're not running 10K and they don't need to have a high VO2, who cares? Golfers don't need a high VO2. It has absolutely no correlation whatsoever. It also has no correlation. Mike Boyle, actually, when we got together, we were talking about this, because I think that even the coaches were influenced by the early sports science research. He suddenly, you know what, this doesn't make sense, stopped it. His athletes got better. You heard Greg Cook talk earlier in the week about some of the best things he's done for his triathletes, is to get their core strong and actually get them to sprint and cut down some of the endurance stuff. The other thing I want to say is, before all the sports science world, we used to just get fit doing the sports we played. We didn't do a lot of training. Or we just start shouting out loud, sports, quick, go. Soccer, tennis, baseball, hockey, basketball, that's good. Okay, no one yet has given me an endurance sport. Everything so far is an interval-based sport, okay? Go hard. You watch the World Cup soccer, David Beckham, he's there. Well, I can't kick with the left foot, all right? And then you're worried about his hair, all right? Okay, so vigorous activity and then relax. Most sports are like that. Play this video, please. And we used to get fit just doing this. Is it playing?
So it's young Paul Douglas, 22 years old, who starts the tie for Jed Forrest. Oh, and there's a lovely break immediately by Mark Smith, and Smith is all the way. He's being chased by Harry Hogg, but Smith has angled his run beautifully. And I tell you, what a blow for the guest side, Jed Forrest,
these days.
right from the very kick-off.
The Aussie boys still wear those, don't they, with Aussie rules football? I play that for the purpose of, that's actually sevens rugby. It was back in my college days. Sevens is 14 minutes long, 2 7-minute halves. And it's absolutely a series of sprints. There's not many people on the field, so there's lots of breaks and opportunity, and you're sprinting. It is without doubt the most exhausting game I've ever played, sevens rugby. Okay, there are other sports. So most field sports are that way. High intensity, then recover. It was probably a good 4 minutes before, by the time they took the kick for the conversion and got the ball back, that I even had to do anything again. And the rest of the game goes like that. Okay, so we can learn a lot from that. The other thing, let's just get back to common sense. Which of these guys do you want to teach golf to? Now, it's a little bit unfair because I've got a younger gentleman on the right than the younger gentleman on the left, but it's my slideshow and I get to choose the pictures. But there's a reason that I've chosen someone on the left that's a little older. If we think about marathon runners, they're kind of thin and gaunt a little bit, all right? And they don't have much muscle mass relative to a sprinter. It's interesting that research has shown that the atrophy you see as you age, okay, it's due to the preferential atrophy of the fast-twitch fibers, is the same in masters distance runners as it is with sedentary elderly people. So you basically get a very good pair of running lungs, okay, if they don't do the vigorous activity. So you sort of ask yourself that, which athlete, and also which is better for health. And we'll get into that, and you'll actually find, and I should actually mention, one of the reasons I got into this is Dr. Euros Rhodes, who was actually the inventor of that little step unit over there. He used to film a lot at the Olympic Games, and he kept in contact with a lot of the athletes, and he just had sort of this observation that the sprinters were getting less disease and were living longer than the marathon runners. So he was always like, because it was at the time when the sports science world was going down this path of lots of long, slow endurance. So a brief history, we're going to go through this fairly quickly, so we've got a fair amount to get through here, but there used to be the old versus new American guidelines. The old guidelines, exercise 3 to 5 times per week for 20 to 60 minutes at an intensity of 50 to 85% of your VO2 max, or 60 to 90%. Where do you think most of the research was done? Universities. Who are the subjects? Students. When do they have classes? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 to 5 times per week. Your Honor, I'm putting that as Exhibit 1. Second thing, In the early days, we only had the opportunity. I mean, I was in the early days of sports science. Sports scientists, we had stopwatches and rulers. And up to the biochemists, we were a little intimidated. So the first tool we had was this, measuring oxygen consumption. Anyone in the early days remember a Douglas bag? You used to collect the air in a Douglas bag. We had to fill the Douglas bag, right, pretty much, or get a large volume of air so that the equipment at that time could measure the VO2. We didn't have the ability to do this breath by breath. I couldn't do a 100-meter sprinter and really measure his VO2. We can now, but not back then. So what happened? What produces a large volume of expired air? Things that last a long time. What happens when things last a long time? What happens to the intensity? Is it high or low? Low, lower, right? So can you see how the research was a little bit biased, perhaps? And again, I'm not saying that doesn't have value and that it doesn't work, but that's all we did. Hell, I mean, I remember it. Every student wanted to do VO2. We would change the color of the cap and see if that changes it. You know, master students trying to think of a project. Okay, so we got a little bit overzealous with that. And what that led to, if you could play the video, please. It's led to this. This just incessant getting on a treadmill, getting on anything else, low intensity, and they're going along. And a lot of people aren't seeing results. And then, of course, you've got to have TVs on there, haven't you? You've got to be able to watch TV. If you're watching or reading a book when you do something, that's fine, but don't count it as part of your exercise routine, okay? If you're not concentrating on the exercise, I'm sorry, it doesn't count in my book, all right? It's great to do if you enjoy it, that's fine, but you need some vigorous. So we want to get away from this. But I was there. I was teaching aerobics at Colorado State University in that era, and it was very much influenced by that early sports science research. The good news is we've got some better stuff going on now to change that. First point, though, is in 1995, they convened a very large group of scientists, got together, basically because they were realizing the guidelines, the old guidelines they had, weren't working. Okay? People weren't doing it. One of the reasons took up too much time. I think there's another reason it's not as effective as what we're going to be getting into on the interval training. All right, so the other problem, though, is that one of the studies that really influenced this, and you've probably heard this, have you all heard about if you take 30 minutes and we can split it into 3 lots of 10 minutes? Yeah? And that could be just as effective? That came from a study by Jakisic in 1995. And the problem I had with that is if the intensity is important, as you'll realize at the end of this. So 3 lots of 10 minutes. That means in 10 minutes, if you're not perspiring in 10 minutes, I'm sorry, you might as well be sitting down watching the TV. Okay, so are you going to change and shower 3 times in the day? So there was a practicality problem with that. At that time, I had already gone into this much shorter duration spread throughout the day, 60 seconds. And we think about it, it's like really nothing new. At the time, for some reason, I'd been so indoctrinated, but it's nothing more than interval training. But that sports science research got us so focused, and I saw it influence so many coaches that didn't used to do it, and suddenly they were changing their training programs and just chucking a lot of this stuff, this long, slow stuff, into a games player's training protocol. Okay, so I had a problem with that. The one good point, you can always make this if you want to go back to a governing body, the ACSM and the CDC, Center for Disease Control, made this statement. All right, accumulation of physical activity in intermittent short bouts is an appropriate way to achieve the activity goal. The activity goal being about 120 to 210 calories a day, which is easily accomplished in a short period of time with sprint interval training, okay? So at that point, this is an important point because at that point, a lot of researchers started to look at the research a little differently. First thing, though, we've got to clarify this. Hopefully a lot of you are pretty good on this, but it's still important because the general public really don't get this. And for a long time, these words were bastardized so much. I just feel like people were scraping their nails down a chalkboard when I used to listen to some of the explanations. Someone give me a definition of aerobic exercise. With air. With oxygen. With air. Great. Okay? Simple. All right? Anaerobic exercise. Without. You've all done Latin. Well done. Okay? But you used to have all this stuff as if, well, this is aerobic and this is anaerobic and all of these different sequences. And that, anaerobic's bad because it's not aerobic. Unless you can actually show me, I'd love to find anyone in the room that can show me an exercise that is purely anaerobic, that there's no aerobic metabolism going on. We both together could go and win a Nobel Prize for science. So, talk to me afterwards. Anything you do is aerobic. You don't stop breathing. And the point is that when you go vigorously with anaerobic metabolism, you've got to put those fuels back. How are you going to do it? aerobically. All right, and we'll get into that. So let's look at what happens. So this was a problem. Anaerobic sort of metabolism, anaerobic exercise almost got a bad word as if it was bad. First point, our metabolism is complex. All right, down the middle there, that's the sort of your glycolysis and your Krebs cycle. I'm sure all of those that have done some exercise physiology, at one point you had to learn and memorize that, whatever. All right, it's pretty simple if we just come at it from sometimes a common sense point of view. Okay? What we're going to do now is just look at some graphs at some research we did at Colorado State University, looking at the oxygen consumption during a sprint versus the long duration. And I think this is where, and there's a lot of research out now supporting this. If we actually look, this is your classic steady-state exercise. When you put someone in a laboratory and you put an oxygen, the respiratory mask on them and you measure their oxygen consumption. The line along the bottom here, let's see if I can get this. Is it the red button? Not a very sharp point. Am I doing it wrong? Anyway, the line down the bottom, okay, we've got a bit of a wand there. All right, the dotted line there, that's your resting level. So when someone comes in the lab and they sit down, we measure the resting level and that goes across. So then the exercise, we can measure the area above that under the line of oxygen. All right, so we can actually measure the calories. So this is like your classic 20 minutes, moderate activity, 60% max heart rate. Okay, just kind of look at a mental note of how high the oxygen consumption is when it's at steady state. Steady state is where we call basically the workload that you're doing. You're able to bring in oxygen to provide the fuel or the calories you need, and that's it. You don't really have much anaerobic metabolism contributing at that point. That's what we call steady state. But you realize there's a delay getting there. Now, as you stop the exercise, which is the second vertical dotted line, it doesn't come straight back down, right? That's you being out of breath. Your metabolism is elevated. Now, how many people say, they've heard if you exercise in the morning, your metabolism's elevated for 4 to 5 hours? Sorry, it's not. Okay? Typically back down probably within about 30 minutes. The only athletes that have been shown to sort of really crank it up for about 2 hours are very, very elite endurance athletes that can run at or above their anaerobic threshold. So, but we can also look at that elevation of metabolism at the end there, and this is very important. It used to be called oxygen debt, and I think the science world should have left it at that because I think that's an easier concept. It's a debt that you've paid basically from anaerobic sources, and you have to put those fuels back, and you're using oxygen to do it. It's now called EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Can't even say it myself. So just use oxygen debt is my advice to your clients, okay? Because that's a concept I think people can grasp. Now, the line, and this is 20 minutes, is a little below 30 there in the example. Same subject, these are 60-second sprints. And people, what, 60 seconds? That's not aerobic. It's not long enough. The VO2 is way higher than 30. Now, I'll give you the fact that it's not prolonged, okay? Fair enough. But can you kind of see that those O2 debts are a little bit larger? And interestingly here, what we also see, because if you're not fully back down, you've got a bit of a debt going into the next one. These were 30 minutes apart. We redid this an hour apart, and that sort of plays in depending upon the rest period. The purpose of spreading these out with long recoveries, because you're probably thinking, why would you have these long recoveries? You're going to have an athlete standing around at the track. Well, not necessarily. In those spaces, they could be doing some of these great corrective exercise stuff that you've been working on this week. Or you've got a busy CEO in the office who never has time to exercise. They can do a minute. That's why that little unit came in when I started working with that. So that it's something that we could get high intensity, and then someone in these clothes do it and then get back to their desk and carry on working. Okay? Now, what we can actually do if we put them on top of each other, just so you can quickly kind of see the difference between the two, but the more striking one, if we actually now measure the oxygen consumption from the 20-minute bout of exercise, and that's represented by the full pie chart, okay, each one of those, then the first bout, second bout, third bout, represents each of those 3 bouts, okay? So we can see that a fourth bout would have basically filled the pie. So what we're showing there is 4 all-out 60-second sprints was utilizing the same amount of oxygen or burning the same number of calories as 20 minutes of the moderate. Everyone get that? Okay, pretty straightforward. So you've got about 1/5 of the time invested for the same accomplishment. And what do people not have enough of? Time. Your Honor, exhibit number 2. Okay, This is the common sense one. I often do this. I don't have a chair up here, so I'll have to use my quads. If I'm sitting down and I'm doing this, watching TV, do you expect me to get fit? No. Stand up. Does it require more calories to stand than sit? Many more? Not really, but a few more. Now I walk. Walking is really nothing more than a modified fall. We're kind of catching our center of gravity. We're very efficient at it, okay? So then we start to jog and then we run. What is the main component of energy expenditure in gait? Anyone know? Very good. Some clever people, okay? It's raising your mass against gravity, vertical displacement. This is not a linear relationship, and this is key. So as you can see, it's an exponential relationship. Once you get up to sprinting, you go that across, you're at about a 5-fold rate of caloric expenditure. But that's not the only component, because we've also got to take into account that oxygen debt, okay? But that's an important one for people to get. So yes, you can burn calories by walking, but you've got to do a lot of it, all right, to burn the same number of calories. So do it if you enjoy it and it gives you a stress break and you're recovering from something. That's the time when I think that can be useful. But then the question comes in, people go, well, that's all very well and, and good, but what about the healthy heart? Because even though I've said all of that, they're going, well, that's just calories. We've got to have a healthy heart, and Bob and Mary over there, they need to lose weight. And I know that to lose weight, the best way is this long, slow endurance stuff. No, it's not. We'll start with the fatty acid metabolism, okay? I've just brought up one study here. There's so much in the literature, folks, on showing that high-intensity interval training burns more fat than the long, slow stuff. It's almost a waste of time to carry on doing more than this one. So I've only just got this one right now. But if you actually, on my TPI, I did an article called Sports Conditioning where I kind of compare both long, slow endurance versus high intensity on all of these different parameters. So you can see a lot of the studies there. This study actually had shown, that it was well documented that fatty acid oxidation occurred with long, slow endurance, but they wanted to compare it to the intermittent training. So basically, it consisted of either continuous submaximal endurance treadmill training or the intermittent high-intensity interval training. Bottom line of the summary is that although both improved, the group that did the interval training had better and higher beta oxidation or fat metabolism. Okay? They've even shown now that someone will burn more fat or utilize more fat doing high-intensity interval training, even if the actual total amount of calories that are burnt are less. Okay? The study's showing that now. So, and again, if that sometimes sounds difficult, remember the picture of the sprinter and the marathon runner? And as we always say, have you ever seen a fat sprinter? Okay? A lot of the time people get confused on this because it is true that when you're going at a lower intensity, you are getting calories as a percentage at a higher amount. But do you want a sort of a low percentage of a large number? So do you want 50% of 200 calories in the sprint? Or do you want 75% of 100 calories? Okay? Everyone get that concept? You get if it was the lottery, right? If you're offered money with the lottery. Okay. I know it's getting long. I know it's going. Come on. Okay. So then what about the cardiovascular component? How many people have heard of Tabata? No. He's now got a reputation. They're calling them Tabata squats and everything in the sort of fitness industry now. It's coming through. He's a Japanese researcher and did a lot with the Japanese skating team. I mean, check this out. 70% max running for an hour a day, okay? 5 days per week. The other group doing super maximal, 170% of maximum, 20-second sprints, 10 seconds recovery, doing 7 to 8 sets, okay? Now, you've got an hour versus about 2 minutes and 40 seconds worth of activity. Actually, with the recovery, you've got about 4 or 5 minutes. Hour, 4 or 5 minutes. The group that did the sprints had just as good of a cardiovascular conditioning, but had better improvement in their anaerobic metabolism. Oh, let me try this again. Okay, an hour to get A, or 5 minutes to get A plus B. I think that's a fairly simple decision as to which is a $100 bill, yeah? This is really important, and I want to mention to this in as much that I sometimes think we've got to watch not to overdo it. As I got out of competitive sports, I found myself training less with higher quality. And I will make a phrase here. I think I want to somehow patent this, but of course you can't. So write it down and use it. I like it. Inactivity is a bad thing, but rest is a good thing, and there's a big difference between the two. When you go hard, actually, let's do this with me as well, because just in case you're a little sort of, I don't know where this is going. How many people think they can get pretty fit a minute a day? I've got like one hand. All right, close your eyes. Everyone close your eyes. You've all come with me to a stadium stairs. Okay, big stadium stairs. I've even got Michael Johnson with me. He can't make it to the top, so don't worry. There's plenty of stairs for you. I'm going to ask you to give me a good, honest effort. If you're feeling really fit, you can sprint your heart out. If you're new to exercise, you're deconditioned, just give me an honest effort. I'm going to blow the whistle. I want you to start going. Ready? Go. You're starting to go. You're going single steps. Some of you are going double steps. We're going along. We get to about 15 seconds. You're starting to breathe pretty hard. We're going a little bit further. You're really driving up. You're starting to feel the legs now a little bit. You get to 30 seconds. Now the legs are really feeling. Now you're really breathing hard. You get to 45 seconds. You'll remember that when you're doing 300 meters. Now you're really burning. Your lungs are starting to really feel that lactic acid. Your legs are. You're puffing, and it goes. And finally, 60 seconds, I blow the whistle. Open your eyes, and you go, whoo! Thank God for that. Couldn't wait for that whistle, right? Okay? Now, if you'd have gone for an hour's jog, do you think you'd be more out of breath with the hour's jog or that 1 minute sprint? Okay, now, go home, folks. It was a great effort. See me here, not tomorrow, because I want you to rest. Come back another day, 2 days later, and we're going to do it again. Ready? Go. So we do that. And we're going to do that for a couple of months. So that'll amount to 30 of them. Anyone in this room doubt that they'll be doing more steps on day 30, on the 30th one, than they did on the first day? Anyone think they'll be just doing the same? Am I speaking Dutch? Everyone agree with that? Why? Because intuitively you realize you challenge yourself. The body, a simple physiological principle, the body adapts to stress, period. Okay? So how stressful is sitting on a bike, on a recumbent bike, watching TV or reading a book? Not very stressful. Okay? You're out of breath. The cardiovascular system is on full burner. All right? And as we showed earlier, the big misconception is that during short duration activity, the aerobic system doesn't contribute much. Nonsense. Research shows now as much as 50% of the energy can come from aerobic metabolism. It's just not enough. So the anaerobic metabolism has to kick in a lot. Okay? So it's a lot more complex, all right, than newer research is showing. This study is, as I said, very important with respect to rest. There's a group up in Canada, Burgomaster, they were doing a lot of sprint interval training, showing that that improved the cardiovascular conditioning. But they were also starting to see a bit of a plateauing with their anaerobic capability. So the hypothesis of this was to basically give them more rest. So they were doing 6 sessions of sprint interval training, performed over 2 weeks, with 1 to 2 days rest between, and that would increase the citrate synthase maximal activity and the endurance capacity during cycling at 80% of the VO2 max. So what they did, they measured their VO2 max, they had them do 80%, and they measured how long they could last at 80%. Okay? And you see there the VO2 is 45. Little test, what's 45? Well done, you're still alive, everyone's still here, good, good. 45, average. So these aren't elite athletes, just average college-age males. All right, they studied them before, and they did 2 weeks of this. All right, it actually amounted to, they did 4 sets, and these were the Wingate tests. Wingate test is 30 seconds all out on a stationary bike. 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, and 4. Why do you think they did 4 on the last one? To compare the power outputs, okay? So that's 16 minutes over 2 weeks. That's all they did, okay? The control group did nothing. I love the way we spend lots of money on control groups doing nothing to find out no change in the control group. There's a surprise. I know, we've got to do it. I'm just kidding. So anyway, after the sprint interval training, remember, folks, that's 8 minutes a week. Okay? Citrate synthase maximal activity increased by 38%, and muscle glycogen content increased by 26%. But here's the striking point. The endurance capacity doubled in 8 minutes a week for 2 weeks. They went twice as long as they did. Now, a lot of people are going to go, well, that's only because they improved the anaerobic performance. Okay. I don't care what they've improved. They've doubled their endurance. And I think as a coach, that's what you care about. The reality is, though, they're improving both systems. Okay. Now, the interesting thing as well, one of the subjects actually was less. And they kept that data point in. When they asked him why he got off the bike, he said, well, I twisted my ankle playing basketball yesterday. I think they should have thrown that data point. So the reality is, it's actually a little bit more than doubled. Okay, you can do that, all right? So the other interesting thing is they got better results for the power output by having the rest. So the message there, the take-home message, don't hammer your athletes. We'll be getting into some of the reasons for that why. Recent pilot study we did on the little Xiser unit over there to sort of also get through to sort of the general population, not athletes per se, and that's a lot of the people you're dealing with. We also use it obviously a lot with athletes. We had 27, mostly ladies, all right, and we did 12 minutes per week, and that was on this unit. So what they do is they 20-second little sprint, and once they're capable of doing a curl and press, they were introducing that. It's kind of intense. When you look at it, it doesn't look like much, but you should try it out sometime. You get a concentric eccentric, so it really raises the metabolism very quickly. And you'll see these ladies doing it, and you'll see how out of breath they were. So they would come in on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. They would come in, and you could use a stationary bike for this. We just used that protocol because we had them, and that's probably a little less expensive for us to get in the bikes. But you could do bikes if you had enough of them. You use treadmill. I'm going to show you some of the protocols I do at Mission Hills. Come in, do 20 seconds hard, recover for 20 seconds. 20 seconds hard, recover for 20 seconds hard. 4-minute recovery. Do it again, 4-minute recovery, do it again, 4-minute recovery, do it again. The mathematicians amongst you should add up that to 4 minutes. They do it again on Wednesday, there's 8. Again on Friday, there's 12 minutes per week. Yeah? Okay. The measurements, we did submax test heart rate, submax rate of perceived exertion. We did weight, body, fat, and girths. So this is what it looked like. Can you play the video, please? Your camera. Go! Yeah. So first thing is, I think most of these ladies have probably not done any vigorous activity since they were kids. All right? The interesting thing was, 20 seconds, they learned that 20 seconds. If I went 22, I was having dumbbells thrown at me. Okay? Because when you tell someone 20 seconds to give it all you got, that changed the intensity. The reason we actually went 20, 20, 20, Rob was actually the first with older clients. We used to do 60 when we first did it. And for a lot of people, 60 is too long. What happens when you're going really hard and you're going 60 seconds? They go, I'm not going to last 60 seconds. So they back off the intensity. And that's not what we want. Intensity is the key, and you can do it safely. You can also do 30-30, and you can build to a full 60 seconds. What's magic about 60 seconds? We'll get to that. But believe me, 60 seconds is the magic number for any human being. Okay? You'll notice now this is on the third one. We're getting a little bit fatigued. The lady at the end there, I think she stops curling, pressing the dumbbells because she's getting very tired. That's the point. We're physically exhausting them in 60 seconds worth of activity in a very short period of time. Okay? So the question is that better for these people, or do they want to do this long, slow stuff? All right? Oh. Very good. All right, you got that. So that was their fourth one, and they were done. So these are the results we got with it. Submax test, rate of perceived exertion. Basically, we were doing the Harvard step test, so a metronome speed on a set box height. No one actually completed the test. None of them could make 3 minutes. So it was a 10 for everyone. We then, obviously, we didn't go the full time because you measure the heart rate at the same time frame that they were before the study started. But the rate of perceived exertion, their perceived exertion now had come down to around a little over 6. What do you think that makes a difference in people's functional life? Maybe walking the golf course. Maybe not feeling too fatigued at the end of a round of golf when they're not shooting as well. So they get disappointed and frustrated. Their heart rate was 13 beats per minute lower. Again, a huge effect on your day-to-day activities if you've got a 13 beats per minute reduction in a set workload that you did prior to the study. Weight, they lost an average of 4 pounds. Not a ton, but as we'll get to, we were doing vigorous activity. So do you think they may have gained some muscle mass? Okay, those fast-twitch fibers possibly being activated. But what about the girths? Over 13 sites, they lost 13 inches as average. And we tried to do a diet change. We had 2 dietitians, myself and another person. We had a few conflicting ideas, and at the end of the day, that probably wasn't the best thing to do with them. And for whatever reason, maybe because we didn't do it on a daily basis, the journals came back and they were all kind of like, oh, that didn't do anything. So the diet was pretty much non-changed. Okay, so this was pretty successful just from the exercise alone. So obviously, I often say diet with the exercise, it's not 1 + 1 is 2, it's 1 + 1 could be 5, could be 10. They synergistically work together. What do we got here? I can't even remember. Can you play the video, please? Oh, yeah. So here we go. Here's some examples of what I'm doing out of Mission Hill. So this is a young tennis player, hoping to get to UCLA. She's only 14 right now. So again, she's doing this long, slow stuff. We've seen massive improvements in her anaerobic power. This is 30 seconds. I just chopped it there. You can kind of see her slowing down. So the idea is for it to get fatigued, use a resistance that 30 seconds pretty much slows them down. On a treadmill, if you don't have a sprint treadmill, it gets a little dangerous to do the speed. So we basically crank up the resistance, and then she can kind of jog and just straddle the treadmill. Usually on the treadmill, because of the speed issue, I usually do the 60 seconds. So I don't have to have the intensity quite as high. She also does the exercise. You've already seen that. Now, here's an older guy. So a lot of people say, well, you can't do it with the old people. Nonsense. Rob's been working with Brian on the corrective exercise. I did a lot with him on the cardio stuff. Also the diet. This guy did do the diet with huge momentum, massive change in it. Just a different human being now, all right? Really challenging. So we're working on his posture a little bit, but he's getting there. Okay, now, probably a lot of people are sort of thinking like, wait a minute, do you do this with someone that's never done this before? No. You start slowly and gently. I don't care if you put someone on a bike or a treadmill and you go, Bob, just as it goes if you're going for an hour's walk, and see what they do, see what they look like in a minute. Ask them, how do you feel? Feel fine. Okay, you got a baseline. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit harder now. All right, a little bit more vigorous. The key point is, as long as they get a little bit challenged, there'll be an adaptation. Now, the bigger the challenge, the greater the adaptation. But you can play that slowly. The key point is, as they start to get fitter, and I've seen this so often when I started working, I'm getting really fit now, so I've done it for 3 minutes now. No! Increase the stimulus, the intensity. That's the key challenge. So as they get better, more steps, okay? Or more resistance, all right? So you increase the intensity. So this one is, I couldn't get a good one off the internet, so I'm afraid you have to watch me do this, but can you play this video? This is probably one of my favorite cardio exercises, if you want to call it cardio, all right? We've been doing them at the back there, messing around. I'm sure you've all seen a Turkish get-up by now. It's everywhere over the internet, all right? The point with this, if you can kind of hear me, that I couldn't get on the internet, I like to do 5-5 each side. So I did 5 on the right. This is coming to the left, just about making it there. I mean, just completely exhausted from a cardiovascular perspective, okay? So, that's 60 seconds. I can do 5 and 5, 60 seconds, and I'm doing it with all the people at Mission Hills, old people too, all right? You have to sometimes work with them to be able to get off the ground, but even the motion of trying to get off the ground becomes a great exercise. So, I mean, people have covered far greater stuff than I can cover on the sort of biomechanics of all of that and some of those issues. But from a metabolic point of view, I want to get that point across. That's a phenomenal cardiovascular training exercise. Unbelievable, okay? Who would you rather go to a war with, sort of warriors from the past that could do Turkish get-ups or a marathon runner, all right? They'd be blown away, all right? Okay, how are we doing on time? I think we're good. So what I want to do now is talk about some of the other physiological consequences of high-intensity exercise, because it's not just about the cardiovascular component. All you mentioned is an optimal time to exercise at high intensity. One of the reasons is if you go all out for 30 seconds and you measure the oxygen debt, that's A. If you go all out for 45 seconds, measure the oxygen debt, that's B. B is greater than A. Okay, so you get a larger oxygen debt from 45 seconds than 30 seconds. If you go all out for 60 seconds, that's C, the oxygen debt. C is greater than B. If you go all out for 90 seconds, that's D. D is not greater than C. 90 seconds does not produce a larger oxygen debt than 60 seconds. Why? What happens at 60 seconds? You're done, aren't you? Your lactic acid is so high, it inhibits muscular contraction to stop you producing more lactic acid, which is a wonderful thing, otherwise you'd die of acidosis. All right? Wonderful inhibition mechanism there to keep us alive. But at 60 seconds, you're not contributing much from an anaerobic metabolism because you're so fatigued. Okay, so 60 seconds is kind of optimal. It's optimal for another reason, which we'll get to in a little bit. Also, losing fat. A lot of people reach a plateau. They'll target with the long, slow endurance stuff the adipose tissue. But you've also got intramuscular fat. And research has shown the high-intensity training is where you will target that. all right? The marbled meat, if you want to say. Okay, so you need the high intensity to get that. This is very important. I mentioned earlier with the marathon runner, the picture of that, how gaunt and thin the muscles sort of get. It's because of the preferential atrophy of the type 2 fibers. Okay? Finish this off for me. If you don't use it, okay. So when people go, well, I'm getting old, I shouldn't do vigorous activity, couldn't be further from the truth. More than anything, the older people need vigorous activity to get those fast-twitch fibers alive. All right? That's all the strength training we've been doing. It's also the sprinting. All right? And the benefits are phenomenal when we get that. So, you know, make sure that your older athletes are doing this. Again, progress. Do it gently. But as they get better, increase the stimulus. Okay? And they'll get that. They'll get those fast-twitch muscle fibers. And those are so important also in their balance. What's the #1 killer in the elderly? Falling down. Okay? Better endorphins, feeling good. The runner's high. We used to see it associated with only marathon running at the end of the race. That's when the lactic acid would get high because the glycogen levels would get low and the anaerobic metabolism would kick in a bit more. Guess what? They've shown now that just a 60-second sprint will produce beta endorphins. Feel good. So get up, go sprint up a hill for 20 seconds. I often tell people, they don't have enough time to exercise. You've got a staircase in your building? Start at the bottom of the stairs and say, take the stairs and walk instead of take, no, don't walk, sprint. Sprint 20 seconds, fast as you can. Catch your breath, 20 seconds, ready, go. In your suit, great, whatever. Get to the office, and lunchtime, do it again. Okay, you can find the time. Don't don't sit in the car trying to find that first spot in the grocery store. Park way, way away. Trust me, it'll be empty, and sprint to the door. All right? There's lots of opportunities. Human growth hormone, very, very important. The elixir of youth, all right? Probably don't take it orally. I was a bit worried about hormonal replacement without a physician's supervision. But the best way to get human growth hormone release is high-intensity activity. Okay? The face of a sprinter, muscular. Face of a marathon runner, gaunt. The sprinters lifting weights with their face. I know Paul Chek does do exercises with the face. Very good thing to do, actually. But primarily, that's due to human growth hormone. It just gets released with the high-intensity activity, repair the microfibril tears there, and basically it's throughout the body. And also great for fat metabolism and a host of other different things. The new stuff now, I don't have time. This is kind of the next talk, if I get a next talk, on inflammatory responses. Think that's of concern to you guys? New research, some colleagues of mine down in Georgia, some naturopaths, Jade Tater, they actually had seen a lot of my work and my writings and got them interested. Actually, they've started a gym of kind of like curves on steroids. And they're sort of rolling it out to gyms, which is kind of exciting because I think that's a great thing that gyms can start to get that in there now, and they're doing very well, and I wish them all the best. He's done some really good research on some hormonal responses of the long, slow endurance versus the high-intensity, short duration. All right? The first one I'll just mention, cortisol. We mentioned a lot about cortisol with the nutrition. Long, slow endurance will produce high levels of cortisol without human growth hormone. Hormones are very different when they're in different environments. When they're alone, they work differently. When they're in groups, they work differently. Okay? When human growth hormone is released with the high-intensity exercise, yes, we still get cortisol, but cortisol is not catabolic. It's not breaking your body down. But when it's alone, it can break your body down. Okay? I lived in Colorado for a long time. Triathletes, marathon runners, I saw it all the time. Chronic fatigue syndrome, who's seen that with the marathon runners? Just too much. We're not designed for it. It's amazing we can train, but you've got to be careful. All right? So the inflammatory responses, this is the next one, and we don't really have too much chance to go into it, but I recommend you go to metaboliceffect.com to read Jade's article. If you go to media within his website, there'll be some articles, and it's the hormonal responses to high-intensity exercise. But this is a chart he put together, so I want to give him thanks for that. I just want to focus on one point. Up in the top left-hand corner, IL-6. When I was doing my doctorate work with heart disease, one of my colleagues was big on what we call this terrible triad. TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-6, and interleukin-1. Now, those three together are extremely inflammatory. When interleukin-6 is elevated on its own, it actually acts as an anti-inflammatory. And guess what short-duration high-intensity activity does? It elevates it on its own. And when it's elevated on it, also inhibits the other two. And that's a very, very unique one. It's kind of some new research, and he would reference all of that. But he also put that together, some of the other stuff I had done, and he kind of put this nice chart together. So that would take almost a whole lecture to go right into that. But I wanted to put it in there for you, and I recommend you go and read the article that he wrote at metaboliceffect.com. The other thing that we've got to look at with endurance training, we've got increased oxidative stress, okay? Free radical damage, okay? That's a huge thing. There's thousands of articles showing cell death is basically correlated with free radicals. So, you know, antioxidants, great thing in your diet. Eat the fruits and vegetables. You can take a supplement too. But I think one of the main things you've got to realize not to stress the body too much. So the more of this long, slow stuff you do, the more of that oxidative stress you've got going on. So yes, the endurance athletes do need to do some of that, obviously. But a lot of coaches and trainers now start to do more of the interval training to push the anaerobic threshold. You think about the endurance athletes. What is their fight when they're going at high intensity? What are they fighting? Lactic acid. Okay? What do you think if you forgot all the science you ever knew? What would be a common sense way for the body to be able to deal with lactic acid? Produce a lot of it. Your body's a very, very clever thing. It'll figure out a way. And they've shown now the interval training pushing lots of production of lactic acid. It increases the transport mechanisms in the cell to get that lactic acid out so it can be utilized as a fuel. Okay? This is very important from an immune response. Plasma glutamine levels, and this is that 60 seconds thing again. Why 60 seconds? They've shown plasma glutamine is an essential fuel to the immune system, but the gut loves it. Okay, so when you eat, it's sort of hard to sort of get it to the immune system. So your reservoir are your muscles, and they've shown that long, slow endurance activity actually inhibits the mechanism by which the body grabs that glutamine, grabs the glutamine out of the muscle, whereas compared to controls, 60 seconds of high intensity actually increases it. So that's rather interesting, I think. So again, you sort of look at my sort of anecdotal evidence, again, looking at athletes over my years being involved with sport, is that the sprinters tended to be healthier, had colds less, things like that, whereas the endurance athletes, their immune systems were often shot. If we could play this video, please. I just want to play this one because I think this sort of is important in terms of listening to someone else that gained through this. This is one of the ladies in that study.
That's impossible. It can't be true. And then when we started on the program, I not only found out that it was true, but it was also the most exhausting small amount of minutes that you could possibly spend. And so I found out the benefits of it, and I've enjoyed it very much. I told my son-in-law, who is a weightlifter and also a runner, that this is the program that I was involved in, and he laughed at me. He said, well, that can't be a full body workout. You're not going to have any success with that. And I said, well, I have. My overall feeling has been that, especially the first week, I got up in the morning and I was high. I couldn't believe it, mainly because I've been so sedentary for a while due to my arthritis. But the energy level has just been so high, and it's continued to be that way through the entire 12 weeks. And that's also something that kind of astounded me. I have a lot more energy. I have a lot more endurance. I don't require nearly as much sleep. I mean, this has really been a side effect that I had no idea was going to be a result of this, and I'm very happy with it. Originally, I came into this program with the idea that I was going to lose a lot of weight. Of course, I had no idea really the components of the program. And so what has happened is I really have not lost so much weight. I've lost, I think about 6 or 8 pounds. But what I have lost is I've gone down 2 dress sizes. I've lost these inches. And no one would have ever been able to convince me that I could lose inches, lose dress sizes, and build muscle, and be thinner. I mean, this has just been a big surprise to me. If somebody told me in the beginning this is basically what was going to happen, I would have thought it was a big fat lie. The greatest benefit of this entire program has been the increase in my strength, because basically I was just jello when I started this. I had no strength at all in my legs. I couldn't get up off the floor. I was taking both of my arms to get out of a chair. I was just a piece of jello. And this has been a gradual increase to the point where I'm really almost to normal. And my problem with my arthritis in my knees has also improved as a result of this strengthening, so that I'm able to bend my knees, bend down, and pick up things off the floor without having to bend from the waist, but I'm able to squat. This is just unbelievable for me to have this happen in 12 weeks. I'm really very, very happy that I've got my mobility back. This is more important to older people than anything that I can think of.
Lovely lady, and it really was sort of great to see. She was so excited, you know, that point she made at the end, that she can now bend down and pick things off the floor, you know, and that component of strength, you know, and you don't get that. She's not going to get those fast twitch muscle fibers if we just had her walking the slow stuff. So kind of a bit of a take-home message for that is kind of treat all of your people like you might do an athlete with a slightly different approach. But the basic sort of framework and concept, that I think you've heard that from everyone else here this week, is the same thing. So also noticed that she talked about the arthritis. Rather interesting, and maybe that's in that interleukin aspect there, because again, obviously arthritis being an inflammatory response. So again, if you're ever doubting any of this, think back to this. Use this with a lot of your clients. You have those notes there. I'll be writing some more articles on my TPI. Look out for that. We'll probably try and get one posted on this inflammatory issue. And now that's much funnier, at least to me. So with that, I thank you, and I'll entertain any questions.
Hi, Mark. A few questions for you. On your methodology, were you using the Harvard step test to predict VO2 max?
With those ladies, I wasn't predicting VO2 max. I didn't predict it. I just used a heart rate response as an estimate of a sub-maximal response to a workload. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you measured endurance.
I didn't measure endurance with those ladies.
Right, okay.
I just looked at heart rate response
Yep.
as a predictor of fitness at a set workload. So they had the same workload, same step speed. I mean, in fact, you know, your 16.25-inch bench for the Harvard step test, a lot of these ladies couldn't do that. So I just made sure they had the same step height. We had a number of different boxes, and we kept the same metronome beat. So it was a set workload, and we just looked at the sub-max heart rate and saw a 13 beats per minute reduction.
Okay, so the second question then is, how are you going to then apply this to golfers who have got a slightly raised heart rate for over 4 hours?
Well, I mean, I've said this before, you know, just because a round of golf lasts 4 or 5 hours, so does a game of chess, okay? You've got to look at what you do in a round of golf. A round of golf is about 5 minutes possibly of anaerobic activity, okay? When you improve the anaerobic component, you take someone like Michael Johnson. Do you think the walking component on a round of golf is difficult for someone that can run 400 meters in 43 seconds? It's like sitting down to them, okay? So it's actually the swing is the ballistic component that is going to be the major muscular endurance fatigue that you're going to see in the golfer when they're towards the end of the round. So if you improve that anaerobic component, which all of this training that we've been talking about this week will do, and you will also train the cardiovascular component with this type of training, you'll have absolutely no problems. You'll see an improvement in the endurance of that round of golf for the golfer. Absolutely
Okay,
no debate.
and last question, sorry. So you're saying the 12 minutes a week, how would you then go back to, just thinking about the UK, the government guidelines for 3 times 20 minutes a week?
Yeah, I'm still fighting it. I mean, I think we're starting to see a change. We see it here too. I mean, next thing you know, it's amazing how long sometimes research takes to go from a university library to the general public. A number of times I see something on the news is like, da-da-da, and you go down there, like, oh, that was 1995. Okay, so you've also got to look at where this comes from. I mean, unfortunately, it is a bit of a battle. You know, because then I think a lot of people who go, yeah, this makes sense, then you go back and you've got those conflicting messages from the government. And a lot of the times that's from governing bodies, which, you know, if I were to sit in a panel and argue, I think I'd win the argument pretty easily. The research is there. It's just that it sometimes takes so long for this new stuff. I mean, that study that was done by Burgomaster got quite a bit of press in the UK, I know, and it did here too. So that's good, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, whoop, fantastic, and then suddenly, you know, so it's a challenge. Guys like you, hopefully, will spread the message.
Mark, great stuff. Thank you. As I'm listening to your talk and hearing you talk about heart rate and measurements and of girth and things like that, I was surprised you didn't measure blood pressure. Is there any research showing that? I would assume that from what you told me, this would decrease blood pressure. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I didn't talk about that. You're right. I could have easily done that. There has been, I mean, basically the parameters of cardiovascular performance usually correlates to blood pressure. But I have seen some studies showing interval training, but a lot of the times it is fairly new for the elderly population. So there's not, and that's usually with the younger athletes, they're not as concerned with blood pressure. So there's probably less of it. But I have seen some unpublished stuff on that. I can't remember, I'll be honest, I'll check on that.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Guys.